All right, part 2, bundle review, bundle 1. Back of the sheet starts with number 13. So let's get into this. Why did the first English colonists of North America settle near rivers? Some of you, when you think about this, okay, you have a source of fresh water, you have a source of transportation, and along the rivers there are other resources there, food and plants. Okay, so you have resources and a source of transportation are the main answers that you need to be aware of. If you don't have those, add those to your current answers. 14. Which colony was founded in 1607 and why was it successful? Many of you know already, Jamestown. Now, successful for many reasons, but it barely survived. It survived Captain John Smith. Now what they did have there, they had really good soil that they could plant things. They had, there was a lot of game, animals to hunt, and abundant resources in that area. They were able to plant cash crops, tobacco, sell that to Great Britain for money. So all those were reasons that they survived and were successful. 15. Why did only 60 of the more than 900 Jamestown colonists survive between 1607 and 1609? Really, they landed in a really swampy, terrible location and disease. You know, and in the blue homework, we read some of the documents about what they were trying to do with waste and how it wasn't being flushed down the river. Had they been farther upstream, yeah, but it was absolutely disease-ridden. So disease and swampy location. 16. How were the Native Americans affected during the 1700s and 1800s by European migration to North America? Okay, this is 1700s, 1800s, over 100-year span, and Europeans were coming over. As you remember, Europeans, they had this idea that they were still in competition with other European nations. So political reasons, economic reasons, they were going over there, and then the people who were going to be colonists, they weren't thinking about, hey, there's already people living there. They were thinking about their own personal reasons to gain wealth, religious freedom, these reasons. And so when they got there, they didn't really care about the Native Americans. They didn't, sometimes, of course, there were good relationships, but in general, they took over the Native American land. So Native Americans lost land. They also were treated harshly by the Europeans, and the Europeans had diseases with them that the Native Americans hadn't experienced before, so they didn't have antibodies to fight those diseases, and many of them died. Okay, so Native Americans were affected through disease, loss of land, and harsh treatment. Who founded the Plymouth colony and why? Many of you already know this. So who founded it? The Pilgrims. They wanted to separate from the Church of England. They wanted religious freedom. They did not want interference from the Church of England. They were trying to get away from that persecution. So, Pilgrims, they wanted to practice religious freedom to escape the persecution from the Church of England.
Mr. Medina, please call the front office.
What factors led to the use of African slaves by Europeans during the 1600s? Okay, there were several reasons. The crops that they were growing in the South were labor intensive. Rice, tobacco, cotton, all labor intensive. So it took a large workforce to do this, to take care of these crops. There was a lot of money to be made in those crops, so there was a big incentive to get a labor force. They were immune to the European diseases, so unlike the Native Americans who would die from the European diseases, the African Americans did not. And they were experienced in farming, so they knew how to do some of that work already. The backcountry, number 19, it was a region to the west of the colonies, and it included the Appalachian Mountains. So the colonies didn't go into the backcountry, but they backed up to it. Now, the original 13 colonies, where were they located? Yes, you can tell me, the eastern seaboard of the United States, but at this time there wasn't a United States, and so talk about it in terms of what is there. There's an ocean on one side, there's mountains on the other. So really, the original 13 colonies were up and down the eastern seaboard of what's now the U.S., but it was sandwiched between the Atlantic Ocean over on the east, and to the west, the Appalachian Mountains. So you need to know that. They were between those two landforms, and those geographic features, not landforms. Okay, number 21, we talked about this in class. You're going to get all that information from the foldable. Study all of that in detail. And number 22, how were the Mayflower Compact, Fundamental Orders of Connecticut, and Virginia House of Burgesses an example of representative government? Okay, all three of these we've talked about in some detail in class. Mayflower Compact was the very beginning of this idea of representative government. It was the beginnings of it, so that one is very important. It was the beginnings of the concept of the majority rules. All right, so it was the beginning of saying, okay, I'm going to have someone, I'm going to elect someone to speak on my behalf. Okay, I'm going to stay here in the colony, I'm going to stay here and work. I've elected, my friend James to go and represent our whole colony, so he's going to speak on my behalf while he's going to go, as a Burgess. Okay. It's important today, since it was the beginnings, it caught on and spread throughout New England. The Fundamental Orders of Connecticut were based on the Mayflower Compact, and so is, our government system. And if we held elections in our class, it would be based on this idea of representative government. So everyone would vote, they would tell their representative how they wanted to be, represented, how they wanted their vote to go, and just the representatives would go and cast the vote. So we would have 4 votes, because we have 4 regions and 4 voting districts in our class, and there would be 4 votes cast for anything that we did a group vote on, and this came from the Mayflower Compact, and that's a big reason it's important. I know I switched topics. Going back to the Fundamental Orders of Connecticut, it was the very first constitution in the United States, or the colonies. So the Mayflower Compact was not a constitution. Fundamental Orders of Connecticut were. Virginia House of Burgesses, I know I'm just giving you information that many of you probably already know. It was not a document. Burgess means representative, and this was the first time that the representatives, or the Burgesses from the different voting districts or colonies, came together at a meeting in Virginia, the Virginia House of Burgesses, and they met and talked about different issues and voted, and they represented their district, their colony. The midterm itself is a class copy. You will not write on it. There will be a separate answer sheet that you will write your answers on. There are 20 multiple choice, 10 matching, and some written responses. For, let's see, second, fourth, and fifth period, the written responses are weighted in a heavier fashion, so they have more weight for your grade. There will be lines provided for your written responses. Make sure you fill in all the lines. Answer the question. On the last quiz for the bonus, it asked students to do certain things, give advantages or disadvantages, and students didn't do that. They just told me information about the colony that they picked, but they didn't say these are the advantages, these are the disadvantages. So I didn't give them any credit because they didn't set it up that way. They didn't do what the bonus question asked them to do. So when you do these written responses, make sure you read the question and answer what it asks for, because that didn't happen for some of the students on the last quiz. Like I said before, watch out for the distractors. Study that blue sheet that you have, the review. Use this video to help you supplement your answers that you already have. Make sure your answers match what I just talked about. You'll get your foldable back tomorrow graded, and you can use it to study Wednesday night. Okay, I'll see you in class tomorrow. Good job. Thanks for watching the Get Ahead video.